My advice would be obviously start small. Being a leader doesn't necessarily require you being the loudest in the room or you having all the answers or you having the biggest ego. All you have to do is care about something, care about people, have a passion for something, and you want to build something.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the University of Arizona podcast. My name is Rebecca and I am the host for today's show. I have my colleague here with me, Nicole
Camacho.
And we are thrilled to have Adam with us today. And our topic for today, we'll be talking about neurodivergent students and autistic students, how they thrive in a community like the University of Arizona. And so we're really happy to learn more and know what Adam has been doing so far at the University of Arizona, how he has been impacting students, and what clubs and extracurricular activity he has been part of so far, and how that has impacted his life as a student here. Adam, you're most welcome to the University of Arizona podcast. We are so happy to have you today because you've been one of the people following our Instagram since day one when we started and kind of cheering us from the background, which is really cool. And we thought we could have you on our podcast so that you can talk more about what you do and what your impact has been so far. So what really inspired you to take on that journey of advocacy for the neurodivergent students?
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I guess I'll begin just by introducing myself. My name's Adam Riley. I'm a first-gen, fourth-year political science and pre-law thematic student here at the University of Arizona. I'm currently the elections commissioner for ASUA, which is UA student government. I'm also an executive board member for the pre-law fraternity Phi Alpha Delta. And I'm also serving as a member of the writing staff for the Wildcat Political Review, specializing in U.S. domestic politics and foreign policy. What really began my journey through advocacy and understanding the autistic and neurodivergent community and how they thrive here at the U of A, and not just here at the U of A, but also higher academia in general, was really just understanding my background. So I was diagnosed really, really young, but I didn't really fully understand how my diagnosis affected me until I was close to graduating high school. And when you have a gap like that, when you don't really understand yourself throughout the prime periods of your life, throughout the prime periods of your life in terms of development and understanding your own identity, you become susceptible to what they call masking. Masking is basically a politically correct way of saying assimilate in a neurodivergent context. Once I began reflecting on my own tendency to not only mask but also understanding my hand gestures, the eye contact issues, the pattern recognition, executive functions, struggles that I have, it helped me realize that there probably are a lot of students who exist at the U of A who have the same exact struggles, but they just don't really know how to properly express them because they've been masking and assimilating for so long. Part of my mission in advocacy is helping those students come forward and helping to build an environment where students who are autistic and neurodivergent, not necessarily autistic per se, but also, or exclusively, but students who have ADHD, dyspraxia, Tourette's, etc., they also are prone to assimilating. Maybe the rates aren't as high as autistic students, especially those who are level 1, which is what I am. But they share the same exact struggles in most cases. It's really just helping those students come forward, share their experiences, share their stories, because I think once those students share their stories and share their experiences, it's going to get the attention of higher administration, and that's going to help create and foster an environment where those students feel included. Because coming to the U of A, I initially didn't feel included at first. Looking at myself right now versus who I was as a freshman, it's unrecognizable. I don't know who the old Adam was when I was a freshman. it's very interesting looking back at it. But when I reflect on the sort of the friendships and relationships I built, not just with my colleagues and all my clubs, but also friends, professors, other faculty and staff, it really clicked for me the value of acceptance and just listening. And that's the environment that I want to foster in my advocacy, is creating an environment where people can just listen, share their stories, and fostering that environment of acceptance.
Do we currently have a platform where those type of students can come together and maybe collaborate on something?
Yes, but also no. So there's the Autistic and Neurodivergent Student Association, which is kind of a subcultural center of the Disability Cultural Center. The problem is that organization has very little visibility. The DCC in itself has very little visibility. There's data that exists. I forgot the dates on it or where it came from, but I know it's out there somewhere, where it showed that the DCC is the lowest performing cultural center in terms of students coming in and asking for a space, or also graduation rates. I think it's certainly plausible and feasible for the infrastructure and those systems to exist. The problem is there's a significant lack of data. Students who are autistic and neurodivergent, because of their high masking rates, they don't come forward. And when they don't come forward, it's hard to measure how many there are,
Yeah.
Because autistic and neurodivergent students, they don't really fit the traditional model of identity politics. They don't wave a flag, they don't wear certain clothing, they don't speak a certain language, they don't have a particular skin color. They exist, their struggles are real. It's just hard to easily identify them. And when they're hard to identify and it's hard to see them, the university assumes that there's no problem. So unless we as a culture foster that environment of acceptance, then we can create the proper infrastructures and the proper systems that are needed to give autistic and neurodivergent students the necessary accommodations and the necessary resources and tools they need to thrive.
So what helped you to move out of that shell and come up and be part of those many clubs, have this great idea of helping others or starting a non-profit organization and kind of just participating, like how much, I know how much you participate for sure, because we were together in the MUN club and you were so active. So what really gave you that motivation, helped you come out of that shell?
See, that's a really, really good question. Yeah. So I first entered Model UN in September 2023. And when I first joined, it was really just me begging and pleading to find community, because I look back at my freshman year, and especially during like the later months of my freshman year in the spring semester, that was like the lowest I've ever been. It was rock bottom. I was on medications. It was a low point. And it was in those time periods I began to realize the value of community. And that's what got me into Model UN, because not only did Model UN have shared interests as me in terms of foreign affairs, global politics, but also I thought it was just a great opportunity to just build my confidence and try to change myself as a person. As far as motivation goes, in terms of the public speaking aspect of it, there really wasn't much to it other than I just started doing it. There really wasn't much peer pressure to it. There wasn't really a desire for attention or validation from people. It was really just, I want to do it just to do it. And the first time I did it, it was terrifying. It was a lot of stammering. It was a lot of stuttering. It was a lot of losing my train of thought. But after it was over, after my first speech was over, it was like, wow, like that was it, you know? So I started doing it more and more and more, and the more I did it, the more comfortable I became. And the more comfortable I became doing it, the more confident I was. Now I feel like I can give speeches in front of not just our partners in Model UN, but also senators in ASUA, and also maybe doing public speaking too. And I feel so tremendously confident in my ability to do it simply from that first horrible speech in Model UN, because I guess it's almost like therapy in a way, because I don't know the specific name of it, but I believe it's called like disassociation or something, where the more you expose yourself to what you're afraid of, the more you start to become more and more confident, and you become less and less afraid of that thing. Public speaking terrified me when I was like, before I came to the U of A or before I joined Model UN. Now I love it. You know, I never imagined myself loving it, but it's amazing to look at the sort of connection between who I was now, or who I was then, and who I am now, and seeing the fact that just that one speech was a catalyst for making myself a more confident person.
Yeah, it's something that students should always realize, that when it comes to public speaking, engaging in different clubs or activities, at first, if you haven't done that before, it's always terrifying, because there is where your brain is governed, like there is where your brain is thinking in a specific way, and it has been like that for over and over, or for a long period of time, and so you want to change something, or you want to try out something. So when you do it at first, your brain will be like, no, you can't do this. You tell yourself that, but once you do, you're like, oh, it was even so easy for me to do this. Because when it comes to public speaking, I'll say even people who have been speaking for ages, at times they get afraid to even stand up and speak about something, depending on the context, depending on the situation, also depending on where they are at that moment. At times they are also afraid to even say something. And even students who are so passionate about public speaking, who are like, I want to become a senator one day, once they start and stand up in front of students, they're like, I think I can do this. But once you do that over and over again, like you said, you become more confident. You become better at it. And that's why it's important for students who have never done any of those leadership skills, always start something. Yeah. And even when you think you're so different from others, each student has got different struggles, you know. We are all different in unique ways, and in with different backgrounds, different perspective. There is how unique we are and how different we are. And so if somebody can come up and be like, let me just start something, you can always overcome those fears.
Yeah. I remember a quote from a long time ago that I learned in my freshman year. I forgot who said it, but it always seems impossible until it's done. And I feel like that perfectly encapsulates the idea that once you do something, especially if it's something that you dread doing, it really fundamentally changes who you are as a person. You become way more confident. You become way more ambitious as well. And that's how I started feeling after doing those speeches in Model UN. I started thinking about, like, I want to go to the next level. You know, I gave a speech to Model UN. Now I want to give a speech in front of student government. I gave a speech to student government. Now I want to give a speech in the ballroom, stuff like that. It's all about learning to advance. It's all about establishing the building blocks of your own personal confidence. And I think it's also important to note that, like, it's okay to have days where you want to take a step back. It's okay to feel like you want to go slow. It's okay to feel like, I want to give a few speeches to Model UN, stick with that for a while, and if I want to advance, I will, but for now, I'm sticking with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Students move at their own pace, especially given the fact that, like you said, students have their own sets of struggles. They learn and navigate the system their own ways, and it's all about learning to accept that, learning to embrace it, and learning to understand that growth isn't necessarily linear. It's part of it's up and down.
Yeah, I relate to you a lot. I just recently came out my shell as well. I think this podcast really helped me, and doing public speaking and speaking with other students also really helped me. So, growing up, were you always super shy, or did you also join a student council or anything of that sort to advocate for students?
Yeah, so throughout elementary, middle, and high school, throughout my whole journey in K through 12, I was an incredibly shy individual. There was a brief period in my sophomore year of high school where I started dabbling into like music and giving like live rap performances in front of my class. It's incredibly cringe looking back at it, but I look at it and I'm like, I wasn't totally shy. There were moments where I was like, I feel bold. I feel like I want to do something, but I never really got involved in things like student council or student government in my high school, middle school, or anything like that, even though I desperately wanted to. But I feel like when you grow up in a background like I did where you are neurodivergent and you are high masking, you lose your own capacity. And what I mean by that is you become hyper you become hyper comparative to other people, and you become very susceptible to imposter syndrome, and you start having this feeling of like, I don't want to do this even though I know I might be capable of it, because I don't want to give people the impression that I'm not fit to do it. That's how I was. Even though, like, to an extent, I felt like I could do it, I didn't want others to think I couldn't, There also was this sort of hyper need for validation. That's what triggered the whole, like, music thing in my sophomore year. Was I desperately craved validation from people. In those few weeks, all my frustration and all my shyness just came out in those few weeks. And then I went right back into my shell, I also do think it was solely about just not being around the right people, not being around people who felt like they understood you, not being around people who felt like they got you or even wanted to get you. Obviously, I was like bullied a lot when I was particularly in middle school. And I do also feel like gender roles play a very strong factor.
Yeah.
Because being an autistic man is interesting because they don't fit the traditional image of a man, because I'm very emotionally vulnerable. I'm very honest. I'm very open. I'm very authentic to myself.
Yeah.
And that creates a sort of disconnect between me and other men.
Yeah.
And growing up in a male-dominant environment, especially with two brothers, that really motivated me to just like stay in my shell. So I wasn't really active throughout my time in K through 12 for multiple different factors. But coming to the U of A really changed that because I exposed myself to a vast group of people, not just people who came from very similar backgrounds, but people who I really did relate to and people who I felt like really understood me. It took time. It took a lot of time, but throughout all of that, everything I went through, I'm extremely grateful because it taught me so much,
Yeah, I love the university because you get to meet all kinds of people from all different backgrounds, majors, especially in the Gen Ed classes. I've met so many people from pre-med, engineering, and it's so interesting how everyone has their different hobbies and things they love to do. You mentioned about going through imposter syndrome, and I think that kind of collides through being a first-gen student. How has your experience being a first-gen shaped you?
Yeah, it's shaped me in a lot of ways. So there's a very humorous metaphor I like to use when describing what it's like being a first-gen student. It's kind of like entering the woods for the first time, because it's totally uncharted territory. anything is expected and things come up that are totally unexpected. It's a system that not everyone knows how to navigate. Not everyone who is a first-gen student has the knowledge to register for classes, know to keep in contact with their advisors, know how to navigate like the physical campus. But knowing that it's uncharted territory is almost inspiring, because I feel like when you go through uncharted territory, you get to leave a trail behind you. And when you walk through the woods and you go through life as a first-gen student in college, you get to leave behind a story that other first-gen students could use when they're struggling to navigate the system. Because, full disclosure, I have actually not, I haven't interacted with that many first-gen students. It was mostly students who had like parents who graduated from the U of A or parents who went to other college students. But even those students related to the idea that college is very difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
So it's not just about inspiring other first-gen students. It's inspiring students who just struggle to navigate a system that they just are unfamiliar with, that they don't have extreme confidence in navigating, or they just don't have the resources at all because they are first gen. So recognizing my status as a first gen student, recognizing the sort of impact I have for other first gen students and other students who struggle to navigate the system has really inspired me to just like share my story and to really help out those students every way I can.
I think that's so true. Your metaphor of going into a forest and being sort of blind going through the university. I think freshman year is when I learned about fraternities. I had no idea what that was. Or Greek life, I didn't know what that was as well. And there's so many services here and clubs that I didn't even know about, which I'm still learning till this day.
Yeah, and it's very interesting you bring that up, because as an autistic student, there are still resources that I'm still learning about today. I did not know about the Autistic and Neurodivergent Student Association or the DCC until last semester.
And I'm hearing it today.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? Like when students first come into the U of A, like the infrastructure exists, but because there's either so many of them or because they have very little visibility, they don't know where to go to. They don't know who to reach out to whenever they feel like they're struggling. And it's not just receiving accommodations, it's also connecting with people. You know, it took me a long time to find the right clubs and the right organizations that I truly felt like I belonged in. Yeah. You know, most students who have social circles in the high school life, those are the ones who mostly lean toward like Greek life, or they find themselves in a club right away, right when they're freshmen. But those students, particularly autistic and neurodivergent students and other marginalized students who don't have that social circle coming out of high school, they struggle hard to find that community. And being a first gen student particularly, that does tie into like the fact that even though like it was totally new territory, I can make it familiar by just simply sharing my experiences, sharing my story, hoping that it can inspire other students who had a very similar background as me.
It is really so hard to navigate the system when you don't have somebody to help you through it, when you're the first person doing it, and just learning more about the clubs and stuff. Most people be like, yeah, when you're passionate about this, go do this, go to this club, you love it. But sometimes that's not the thing. You really need somebody to explain to you what will be the end goal of this. But what they all say is like, Do you love it? Yeah, go do it. Do you love immune? Do you love speaking? Yeah, go do this. But there is a way to practice public speaking in so many different ways. Once you find that community, and like you said, if you didn't have that social circle coming from high school, it's so hard. Yeah. And for the autistic student, mostly is that most of them are not kind of shy. They really have great traits and they can become great leaders. But it's because like when they are part of the young kids at high school, in middle school, it's like all those like kids, they don't understand who you are. They don't even understand what struggles you have. And so when you're part of such a community, it's so hard for you to come up with like out of your shell or be part of any club or any social class. So you tend to shy away and just be alone. Now, when you go to the university now where you're supposed to meet those people again, it's like you don't know what direction to take. It becomes a little bit more harder. But the other great thing about the university, like these are older students that they can understand. Even if they don't understand, at least they'll give you the respect you deserve. So it kind of helps you out. But again, which direction are you going to take if this school doesn't have those resources to assist you, or if they have them, they're not visible to students? Mm-hmm. So I think they should do more of like marketing their services or talk more about their services so that those students who are coming out from high school or transfer students who really want to participate in different activities but they really don't know where to go and what direction to take, those services can be able to help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the U of A they have good resources. And I think that's really important to know. Yeah. The DRC does very, very good work in what it does. However, when it comes to autistic and neurodivergent students particularly, those students who do seek accommodations, either they bail out of it because it's a bureaucratic process, or because they find out that the accommodations they receive actually results in even worse outcomes. That's what happened to me when I was in high school. I found out that I perform worse on exams and tests when I'm in a room by myself versus when I'm in a room with my colleagues and my friends. And I found that to be super, super fascinating. And that's what really taught me that, like, even though, like, we have this sort of image or this sort of perspective that every autistic student's accommodations are more or less the same, it's actually not true. Every single autistic student has their own necessary accommodations that they need, and learning to understand that diversity and learning to provide the right accommodations for those students, that's going to have a dramatic impact on their performance, whether it's on not just exams and their grades, but also their social life. You know, guidance counselors, their advisors, learning how to, and those staff members having the proper resources and the proper tools to give those autistic students the guidance that they need is going to affect virtually everyone's performance.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So are there other challenges that the autistic and neurodivergent students currently go through besides we do have resources, but they're not visible. So besides that, are there other challenges?
Yeah. So first and foremost, there is this obvious pressure to assimilate. You know, growing up in a neurotypical dominant environment teaches a lot of autistic and neurodivergent students to assimilate and to mask. And when they assimilate and mask, they don't learn to properly speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves. And that affects their performance, it affects their mental health, it affects their social life. Another great challenge that exists, particularly at the U of A on an institutional level, is a lack of data. Autistic and neurodivergent students obviously exist. You know, it's just hard to find them because they don't. Whether it's because they don't speak up for themselves, or because
they even know if they are.
That's it. See, that's a really, really good question. A lot of students. It's interesting you ask that though, because for a long time, even I myself doubted my own diagnosis because I was like, well, I'm way too normal. You know, I'm navigating the system like fine, but in reality, I wasn't. because I began to realize that even though, like, yes, like your own personal experience matters the most, how you learn to embrace your diagnosis and how you learn to accept it and how you learn to be open about it teaches you to become a way more authentic and confident individual.
Yeah.
And that affects your performance as well. So
And it takes courage.
it
Yeah,
takes
it
a lot.
does.
It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
I had to struggle through a lot of hesitancy to come forward about my own diagnosis, but I'm really glad I did, because obviously I'm way more confident and way more authentic to myself, and I'm really glad that I can be open about it without being judged. But about the lack of data thing, because a lot of autistic and neurodivergent students don't reach out to provide them to get the necessary accommodations that they need or they require, the university assumes that there's no problem. And when they assume there's no problem, then there's no need to enact policy to cater to these students' needs, you know, because that's what every legislator does. Legislators make policy decisions based on data. And when there's no data, they assume there's no problem. On a national level, there's a lot of data that does exist, but not from a college basis. 39% of autistic students on a national level pursue their 4-year degree after graduating high school, but only 17% actually finish and get their degree. And even after they graduate, 80 to 85% go unemployed. Those are catastrophic, staggering numbers. And like I said, it is worth taking into account that those are national levels, but those numbers may be even worse from a college level basis based on the amount and level of accommodations and the infrastructure that system or that college provides to autistic and neurodivergent students.
You are part of ASUA. Is there any way you can create a project to improve the services here?
Yes. So even though I am elections commissioner and
Yeah.
elections is my primary focus, I definitely continue my advocacy and my mission as much as I can. You know, as someone who is a cabinet level official working directly under the student body president, I do have access and connections with a lot of senators. And speaking with those senators, I once gave a speech back in February to the previous Senate class about the current state of autistic and neurodivergent students and how the infrastructure just isn't well equipped to give them the necessary tools and resources and accommodations that they need. I am definitely going to continue giving those speeches and giving those talks with the senators, because although I can't introduce anything myself personally because I'm not an elected official, I really don't have that authority necessarily. I definitely can work with senators, speaking up for myself, speaking up on behalf of other autistic and neurodivergent students who have the same exact experience or at least similar experiences and who have the same exact perspectives when it comes to the infrastructure that does exist. And when those connections and talks do happen, I'm very, very optimistic that a project of some sort can occur that can really get the administration's attention. Because for me personally, like, I hope to create my own 501c3 dedicated to looking at the state and performances of autistic and neurodivergent students in higher academia, whether it's U of A or ASU or NAU, looking at from a statewide basis, the performances of these students and comparing them, seeing where they are, and then expanding to a national level, that is going to help garner lots and lots of data. But when it comes to ASUA particularly, like, yes, absolutely. stuff can happen. I can definitely make things happen. I don't have the same privileges, of course, that senators have when it comes to filing resolutions, but I definitely have like connections with them.
Yeah, you should definitely create something to improve the services here. As a leader yourself, what do you think, if you can reimagine leadership, what would that look like for you?
Yeah, so the neurotypical model of leadership valorizes power, strength, being at the forefront, being egoistic, being loud, because I feel like most people are susceptible to a leader who adopts those characteristics. You know, it's a lot easier for people to follow someone who adopts the mindset of like, you know what, forget the system, forget the rules, I know what I'm doing. But that model doesn't accommodate or make room for vulnerability or nuance, because autistic and neurodivergent students definitely can be leaders. They have the capacity to be leaders. Even though like you can be quiet, even though you can not have like the greatest ego or possess the sort of like strongman image that the neurotypical model of leadership presents, you can still display effectiveness. And I think one of the ways that you can do that is just by making space for everyone, allowing people to share their perspectives, allowing people to share their stories, making space for everyone, making room for everyone, allowing a environment where people can give their perspectives, and that can foster an environment of acceptance and inclusivity. And that to me is really what reimagines leadership. It's putting people first, putting others first, and putting yourself in a secondary position.
Is there any autistic inspiration that you get from, or a celebrity that has your diagnosis that you inspire to be?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's autistic or neurodivergent students per se. It's a lot of celebrities who have mental health issues.
Yeah.
For example, Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson has been an inspiration to me in terms of like being open and being vulnerable. I'm not like super connected into like the celebrity like idealism and hero worship that I think most students are, but when it comes to like who I see as a role model from who is a celebrity, definitely Pete Davidson, just because of his openness and his willingness to be openly vulnerable about his BPD diagnosis, particularly.
When you were talking about like reimagining leadership, I was kind of remembering, because for us we also have that kind of thing. And for me, when it comes to leadership, for sure, I was thinking of, because you talked about like having the rules, and leaders are always seen as people with these rules, as people who are egoistic, they have certain, like those certain traits, and also coming from a background whereby like, I've seen such type of leaders, and it doesn't work so well for a community and a society as a whole. But again, I'm like, if we don't have those rules, how many people are gonna really fall into the category of helping out the organization or the community strive? Because when you don't have the rules, then everybody has to do anything. They have to do anything that they wanna do at a certain point and at a certain time, which isn't kind of so much organizing a system. Because if then the leader doesn't have those rules, and he's like, I know what I'm doing, how many people are going to participate? It's not going to be participatory, because you do not have those rules that are governing you. So I tend to have the system whereby like we have these rules, but at least let's divide them in this and this format, so that at least everybody can have a voice, everybody can have a say. But I've also been part of clubs whereby the leader is like, I know what I'm doing, and they tend to do everything. And then afterward, they're like, I did everything for this club. None of these members are helping me. And I don't like that, because like you have the chance to divide the tasks, but you chose to do everything alone. And then you're complaining. I did take my marketing minor this summer, and it was mostly online. So we had groups, and at some point there is this person who was like, I'm going to do all the work and try to submit everything. We're like, that's okay as a team. So she did the same thing, and I think she left some of the work undone. Oh, no, she did everything, but she left some of the work unsubmitted. So we didn't get the full grade. So the professor sent us an email saying you guys didn't submit everything. And we were like, yeah, we did everything. What's going on here? So we went ahead and checked, like, oh, some of the documents weren't submitted. And in her email, she was saying that, oh, professor, I did everything on my own. She indicated that on the email.
Stop.
And I sent the email back, a reply. I was like, well, we agreed.
You guys are arguing on Outlook?
Yeah, on an email, because it's like,
Yeah.
well, you then say that, because I really felt bad, is because she was like, I'm gonna do everything and help everybody do all the assignments. But at the end of the day, she's like, well, I did everything on my own. Nobody in this group is participating, or what? And I don't like that system. My system is like, let's work on everything and divide the task at least equally, or according to people's, because even if we divide tasks, it can never be 50-50 most of the time. But at least let's give everybody a chance to participate in whatever we're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point, because one of the biggest flaws in a system that valorizes authority and valorizes that sort of like strong man or strong person mentality is accountability. You know, because captain goes down with the ship. If you choose to take charge and the ship ends up going down, that falls on your shoulders.
Yep.
It's a lot more effective, and it creates a much more complete, I would say, and a much more accurate organization and more accurate system and accurate image if everybody has a say.
Yes.
Because a system that valorizes authority doesn't take into account the vast diversity in the world and a vast unique array of perspectives that people can bring to an organization, to a business, to a class, or even to an assignment. And one thing that I've learned, particularly with Phi Alpha Delta, is I meet so many aspiring legal minds and aspiring lawyers who not only come from very similar backgrounds, but also there are some that come from very different backgrounds. Whether it's my colleagues, whether it's general members, students who bring these perspectives, they have, when they're given the tools and the power and the resources by whoever is in a leadership position to contribute to projects, contribute to the organization any way they can, it creates a much more beautiful image because everybody gets to contribute to something great.
And when they contribute as well, they go out there when they're happy and they become like your supporters of the club, and also kind of promoting the club because they are all participating in something that you're all creating. And if something goes wrong, they'll be like, we all own the mistakes. How can we do it better? Yeah. But if you're the only person doing everything, it's like, the leader, that's her fault. That's the person's fault. But like when you agree to participate on something and all work on it together, it does give that like responsibility sense whereby everybody's accountable of like, if anything goes wrong, we all own it. How can we do it better, and how can we succeed next time? So we're going to one of the other questions that we have for you today is, how has serving in these roles, like being part of the Elections Commission and the Pi Alpha Delta Executive, helped you or influenced your philosophy towards leadership?
Yeah, so obviously being elections commissioner, and being an executive board member of Phi Alpha Delta, I'm still very new in these roles, but they have had a tremendous impact on me in terms of what it means to be a leader, and also navigating systems that accommodate vast different groups of people. So being elections commissioner, when people think of elections, they really only think in the moment, casting the ballot. But elections are way more than that. Elections are like, how accessible is the election? Who gets to have a say in the election? Who gets to run in the elections? How easy is it to run? How easy is it to get the application to run? The system during the election period is set up based on what's done months and months prior. It's everything that my role does, keeping the system fair and keeping transparent. And one thing that I strive in this role is ensuring that everybody has a voice. Everyone is included, and everyone has the capacity to make their voice heard in ASUA elections. Not just voting, not just casting their campus group's ballot, but also running. And when you want to accommodate vast different groups of people in terms of allowing them to run for office, you have to make it more accessible. That affects things like the deadline for submitting signatures, how many signatures they have to submit, things like that. And to accommodate those students especially from backgrounds who they're not super confident, or they're just stepping their foot into being a leadership position, providing that accessibility makes it so incredibly important, because you're building the building blocks for a future leader. So that's what makes establishing the framework for an accessible, fair, and transparent pre-election period makes it so incredibly important for the election period during when the ballot is open, and students can cast their votes. As far as Phi Alpha Delta is concerned, it's been tremendous, because I've met so many different groups of people from different backgrounds, whether it's my colleagues or general members who we inspire to mentor, because it has taught me a lot about being a mentor. It's taught me a lot about providing guidance, providing help, providing security and protection to those who have come from a similar background as me, and those who want to inspire, and those who want to be like good leaders and good contributors to society, whether it's in the legal field, whether it's in business, whether it's in health. Providing that mentorship and providing those resources and those tools and that guidance to general members, it's taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot in terms of like navigating complex groups of people, helping them like build the building blocks and establish a sort of framework to give them something to build off of.
Yeah.
When they graduate, or when they continue their journey through whatever field they want to go in, it's inspired a lot.
And what do you guys do in this honorary society?
Yeah,
so
Phi Alpha Delta, also known as PAD, is a pre-law co-ed fraternity. We have a chapter here at the University of Arizona, and it is the largest pre-law fraternity in the United States. Even though we are pre-law, like we're catered to pre-law students, we have a vast different groups of majors. Like our president is not a business major, he's an econ major.
Oh.
Which is interesting, But at the same time, it shows the vast level of diversity within an organization that caters to a specific group of people, but there's still people who don't fit that mold. Mm-hmm. And that's really what helps me as a mentor and helps me as a sort of teacher to give general members the guidance that they need in whatever field they want to go off of. As far as what we provide like LSAT prep, we provide guest speakers, even though our guest speakers obviously are like legal field like catered. They come from the legal field. The words of wisdom and advice and guidance that they give is so inspirational and so wise to where it helps out everyone, Mm-hmm. It's about how you interpret it. We also do recruitment events. We also do fundraisers at businesses, whether it's at university or anywhere else. And it's a really great opportunity to build networking, to build a family, and build your connections, Especially with building connections, having a diverse group of people in terms of their majors or their backgrounds, it teaches you a lot. It's a lot eye-opening. It's a lot more eye-opening to have a vast number of connections from people who come from different backgrounds rather than those who have the exact same. which is why Phi Alpha Delta has helped me out like tremendously. It's about learning about people, and learning about people, especially being an executive board member, allows me to give them space and give them the voice, give them the say in terms of what they want to contribute to our organization.
Do you want to go to law school? Do you guys debate in here? It sounds like
as for me, like I want to go to law school.
Mm-hmm.
I plan on taking 2 gap years just to help like financing stuff, but I plan on going to law school either at the U of A James E. Rogers College of Law or at UT Austin College of Law. As far as like mock debates, mock trials, or discussions, I'm hoping we do that. I think that would be very, very, very fun if we can do it, because I do think that's something that we could do, you know. As a pre-law fraternity with a vast majority of students who are pre-law students, especially those who are like freshmen and sophomores, I think giving them the skills and giving them the resources and talents that they can use throughout law school, and not just law school, but also being a lawyer, is going to dramatically affect their performance. So we'll definitely look into that. I'll look into that.
That would be great. But since you guys bring in lawyers or people with law background to the club, it's so important, because then they listen from people with experiences. I love that. And that's one of the reasons why we had this podcast, because then we have to bring in different students from different backgrounds, politicians, people in the community, professors, faculty. And when you listen to their stories, what they have to say, you learn so much every day. Every week we learn something new.
Every time we have a guest, we learn so many things. I think our last guest was...
the professor.
Yeah, Professor... Jacqueline. Yeah, we learned so much about cyber security and
creative intelligence.
Yeah. And I'm not part of that. I'm also pre-law. So what she was telling us about science, I found it very fascinating. So it's kind of crazy how everyone has their different interests.
Yeah, and it's not just different interests, but it's also learning about how these different interests intertwine.
Yeah.
And intersectionality, you know. Being a pre-law student emphasizes reading and annotating. You read a lot as a pre-law student, but also you read a lot as, you know, a history major. You also read a lot as
political science.
Political science. Even like econ business majors can read a lot. Learning how to interpret data, learning how to explore data, learning how to think critically. All of these skills provide and are given through an intersectional framework, where even if you're like a agriculture major in a pre-health fraternity, you know, even though like that fraternity caters to pre-health students, the skills and resources that you learn as an agriculture major can benefit you.
It can. That's why we were saying like the different things we learn from our guests is that one of the staff for the career development, he's now the career development, like the assistant career development at the moment, but he taught mathematics for over 20 years at high school. Yeah. He also comes from a whole different background. What was his background again? Anthropology. Yes. And we're asking how does that connect what you're doing right now? So at times, like, we may think that you're a law student, I'm a political science student, or I'm this and this. We are all different. We are not different. There is somehow, somewhere, how we are connected as a whole. And if you're part of a club or a community that brings all these people together, it's so amazing, because then you get to see how much and how connected we are.
When it comes to skills and interpreting and adapting what you learn from an organization or from a club or even just from classes, I think it also speaks to your level of engagement with it, you know? And especially being someone who is autistic and neurodivergent, I feel like learning how to engage with the skills and resources you have fundamentally shapes who you are, you know? Because an example would be like public speaking. Public speaking is a skill. It's kind of like a bar. You have a progressive meter almost. Even if you don't learn public speaking from a group like Model UN or from Mock Trial or from other organizations, you can still learn to fill that meter up simply by asking thoughtful questions, engaging with your peers. It's how you utilize the skills and you utilize the tools and resources that you learn from these organizations that builds your mental social resume.
Yeah, and the other thing too, when I was thinking about like when you say that we are kind of like there's a we are connected, and that again also different at some points is that you find that students who are first generation students have got their sets of challenges, problems that they go through, and also when you look at students who are autistic as well, they're also going through certain other challenges. And if you're out there like a first gen, you're like, oh my god, I'm the only person going through this and this. You're not the only person, because other students, they may not be first gens, but they have other issues that are affecting them. And at the end of the day, the two of you are all going almost through the same situations, but in a different way. So sometimes people are always in their mind saying, oh, maybe I'm the only person going through this. No, you're not the only person. You might be a first gen going through a certain situation, and somebody might be even like a fourth generation student, but going through other challenges that are almost similar to yours.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because even though I am a fourth year, I go through a lot of the same challenges that freshmen go through. Even to this day, I still struggle navigating the campus.
Oh, same.
Even to this day, I still struggle with maintaining contact with my advisor, maintaining contact with my professors, even with my old colleagues and my old friends, So I think it is worth noting that it doesn't really matter what your year is. It doesn't really matter what your background is, your status is. We all have struggles. We all have difficulties with something, but it's learning how to navigate those struggles, learning how to build those struggles and overcome those struggles is what really builds our true, authentic selves as students.
Yeah.
What unique strengths do neurodivergent leaders bring to organizations?
Yeah, so they bring a lot of talents and unique strengths. The first one being is pattern recognition. So particularly focusing on autistic students, they don't think in a linear format like their neurotypical peers. They're very non-linear and they're very circular. So they tend to look at the same thing over and over and over again. And when they look at something over and over and over again, it's a lot easier for them to identify inefficiencies, blind spots, areas in the system where they feel like there will be ineffectivities. And those spots can be easily overlooked from a neurotypical perspective. So when you have someone like that who's able to spot them, they can say like, hey, like this XYZ, can we fix this? And the person who's like running the organization may be like, oh, I didn't consider that. They bring unique perspectives in reform too. Like I consider myself a significant and aggressive reformer when it comes to things like Phi Alpha Delta, but also our elections. So that really does shape my ideology as a reformist. Another area would be emotional honesty. Being open and being authentic, but also being vulnerable builds trust with not just your colleagues, but also the people you hope to lead. Because when you are open and you're vulnerable, especially to people who aren't super comfortable being open and vulnerable, it motivates them to be the same way. And when they're allowed to be the same way, when they have the space to be open and vulnerable, that creates a bridge. That creates a connection between those who are in power and those who are following their lead. It creates vast levels of trust. Another unique strength would be what I would say principle over popularity. Autistic and neurodivergent students, when they step into leadership, they don't do it for the title. They don't do it for power. They don't do it for status. They really don't do it for anything like that, which is something that the neurotypical model heavily caters to or heavily emphasizes. They do it simply because they care about people or they care about something. They have a passion. They have something that they want to build. They want to do something. And that also creates vast levels of trust because you show the people that you hope to lead, you give them a sort of like, you give them an image. You give them a canvas, and you say, I have the brush, I have the tools, and I have the resources, but even though I'm the one who's like in charge, and I'm the one who's like in the position to be leading this organization, I'm going to be handing it off to you guys because I care about you, what you guys want to make. Yeah. So that's a very unique strength that autistic and neurodivergent students bring when they step into leadership positions, is putting people first, putting the people they hope to lead first. Because when you're in power, one of the fundamental aspects is when you're in power, you have the ability to empower others. And to empower others, you have to put those that you hope to lead first, and setting aside your own ego. My advice would be obviously start small. You know, being a leader doesn't necessarily require you being the loudest in the room or you having all the answers or you having the biggest ego. You know, all you have to do is care about something, care about people, have a passion for something, and you want to build something, you know. If you are a flower in a garden, you might be growing and blooming slower than the other flowers in the garden, but that doesn't mean that you won't bloom. And when you will bloom, it doesn't mean that what you bloom into won't be beautiful. You know, it's all about pacing yourself. It's all about recognizing your own skills, your own talents, your own strengths, recognizing where you feel like you belong and where you feel like you can contribute the most into. My other advice would be surround yourself with people who get it, or at least people who want to get it. Obviously, living in a neurotypical dominant society, it's hard to come across people who immediately are like, yeah, like you're autistic, like I'm autistic too. You know, it's hard to come by. But even if someone is neurotypical, if they have the capacity to understand and they have the capacity to listen and they have the ability to hear your story, hear you out, allow you to share your vision and your mission, that would provide tremendous validation, and that would provide a lot of confidence because it would show you that people do care. You know, when I first came to the U of A, like amazingly, like it actually wasn't like other autistic students who gave me the validation and gave me the confidence that I have the capacity to be a leader. Yeah. It's my neurotypical peers. You know, neurotypical allies are incredibly important. So surrounding yourself with people who care, learning to embrace your diagnosis, learning to be open and be honest, and don't be obviously don't take life too seriously. You know, being in a neurotypical dominant society, you're going to face judgment. You're going to face people who don't understand. But just because they don't understand you doesn't mean you aren't worthy of understanding yourself. Yeah. And you aren't worthy of having people around you who do understand you. Because those are the people who matter the most.
That's true. And knowing that you're not alone facing those challenges. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a great conversation. You just don't know how much happy we are at the moment.
I've learned so much.
Yep. I wish this conversation could continue, but we still have more students outside because we're going to have another meeting coming up. For real, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming over, and thank you for supporting the UAZ podcast. We appreciate that.